for the Minnesota family up there. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me after this. I'd love to collaborate with the community. This is never just like a one and done kind of opportunity. Myself as well as April love to interact with everyone in the community, excuse me, and collaborate well beyond just these events. So please don't hesitate to reach out after the fact. And you've got my email here, excuse me, as well as my Twitter handle. With me today is April Dunnam. April, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, April Dunnam. I'm a partner technical architect here at Microsoft. It's been here about a year now. Prior to joining, I was an MVP in the business app space, so Power Apps and Power Automate. Really super involved in the Power Addicts community, and I have a YouTube channel if you're interested in checking that out, and a blog. And as David said, happy to help. If there's anything I can help you with, feel free to reach out to me either on my blog or on Twitter at April Dunnam. And happy to be here to talk about list formatting.
Awesome. Thanks, April. All right. So what is on the agenda for us today? We're going to begin by talking about some of the out-of-the-box SharePoint list features. They've come a long way in modern versus classic, and so we kind of want to just at least acknowledge those and recognize what we're provided now out of the box versus what we had out of the box in the classic experience. And then we're going to take kind of a holistic view of list formatting, just an overview of setting up list formatting, what to understand, what to expect out of it. And then there's two flavors of list formatting specifically, column formatting and view formatting. And so we're going to dive into each one of those. We're going to send you home with some list formatting resources. And then we're going to take a glimpse of list formatting transformed at the end, how you can really enhance list formatting even above what you're going to find in just simply the list experience. So let's start with those out-of-the-box list features. So in the modern experience, we no longer have to worry about multi-pages. What does that mean? Well, remember in Classic, when we would go into a list and we would create a new item, we'd have to go to a new page and go to that form, edit it, save, go back. And it was this very transitionary feeling. You felt like you were just being shuffled around the list experience to need to edit and create new. No longer is that the case. We have this single page app experience, and that allows us to add list columns to our list, resize list columns. It also gives us access to what's called custom formatting, which April will take you into in a little bit. And it's definitely an improvement. So let's just dive right into our demos. And we're going to do a lot of that today. We're going to dive right into a lot of demos. And we don't want you to feel overwhelmed either. If you're new to list formatting, you're going to see things like JSON being talked about. Stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Sounds like that's a developer thing. I'm not a developer. Fear not, you do not have to be a developer. What April and I are both going to focus on a lot today is the ability to copy and paste. If you can copy and paste, you can be a fantastic list formatting resource. And that's really what we want you to take. Everything we're going to know today, you will have free and total access to copy and paste yourself and use that as a tool to start learning. So keep that in mind as we go throughout. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed at all. Let's jump over to the first demo. So what we have here is just a simple list, right? Just nothing more than a list with some columns, a couple of list items. This definitely looks different than it did in Classic though. And we see that if I wanted to add a new item, well, now I'm able to do that directly from this page while looking at my list content here on the left. So I can add additional items if I wanted to. If I wanted to edit this item, I can select it, and now I've got my title, my text. I can put in a number. I can say, yes, the Autobot is a good guy, right? I can add a column, and these are all kinds of columns, right? So if I wanted to add a column that just said favorite or something like that, we have this ability through the interface to add choices, right? So I can just select this and say yes. I can add a choice and say no. And we can color code those as we see. So it's nice. It's very simple. It's easy. And then I can increase the size of these, right? So if I needed more space, again, this is such an improvement over what we had in Classic. I can even move around the location of my columns. We see that shuffled around, which is fantastic. But at the end of the day, what really are we looking at? Right? We're looking at a list. It's still just list data. I wouldn't call it transformer-like. I might call it a little bit more GoBot-like. Anybody remember the GoBots back in the 80s when Transformers first came out and were super popular? GoBots were kind of like the off-brand. Today they feel like something you'd get out of McDonald's Happy Meal. They just look a little cheap, right? It's certainly not something that you feel inspired by when you see that transformer beginning its transformation from a plane or a car into this robot. It's cool, GoBots, right? They are functional, but they're not inspirational. Right, and we really are looking to get inspirational here with list formatting, and that's what list formatting provides us. So let's take a moment and take an overview perspective of list formatting. So what is list formatting? Well, as I mentioned, there's two flavors to list formatting. One is column formatting. So when we think of the scope of a list, we have our individual columns of data. Those were those things like good guys or favorite, what I had added, favorite number, etc. That is a single column. We can control the data that is in that column, and we can control how that data looks with column formatting. So we can do things like styling, right? We can change the content of what's visible in the column. Now, does that mean we're changing the content behind the actual column? No, we're not changing the content with our column formatting. We're just changing how the content looks based on the content, and we'll see what that looks like. And then to some degree, we can change the functionality of the content. And what does that mean? Well, take, for example, you'll see a Twitter profile name. We can turn that into a clickable entity, even though the content stored in the column is not really a hyperlink. And we'll talk more about that and show you exactly how to do that. So that is the context of column formatting. View formatting, on the other end, is that entire row of data. So when you think about a list and all of its list items, you have many items in a list. Each one of those items, as we go from top to bottom vertically, you can control the look and feel. So at that point, you no longer have columns that you have to worry about. You're erasing all that. Well, I shouldn't say erasing, you're hiding all of that, and you're replacing it with what you want to be displayed for that individual row. And that can be done with view formatting. Again, you can control the styling and you can control the content of the entire list item or row. And again, you can override the functionality, even creating functionality where there is no functionality. Well, what does that end up looking like in the end, right? So here's a quick glimpse of that. What we're looking at here is an out-of-the-box list. Should be very familiar to all of us, whether we're familiar with list formatting or not. This is a list. We see a title, we see a Twitter handle column. It's just simple data, very Excel-like row-based experience, basic list experience. Here is column formatting. So it's the exact same data. We see the title still there on the left. We see the Twitter handle there on the right. But now instead of just displaying the Twitter name of the actual community member, we're grabbing their photograph from Twitter or some other entity, and we're displaying that. Now, we didn't change the content, right? This content right here still exists right here. We're just displaying it differently. We're taking the content that exists there and we're changing its display properties within the HTML. View formatting, on the other hand, allows us to completely change the look and feel. So again, all three of these boxes here are deriving from the exact same list. We've got Twitter, the name, Twitter handle, and then in some cases here, we have additional data that you just don't see because it's cut off from the screen, but it's geographic location, state, and country, or depending on if you're in Canada here, like Seb is, then you might have province, and we'll see more about that in a little bit. But this is the holistic difference. So we go from just a simple list of just column-like data to still having the column-like data, but each column can be formatted in a different way. And then we go to view formatting, where we're completely changing on each row, right? So when you think about the fact that you're looking at a row, right? So those two things are connecting. If we were to change to green here, there's your row to row connection, right? So we have that connection. There's nothing changing there. We're still dealing with that same sort of data. So this is an overview of how you can enhance the style and the content. And we're not changing the content in the list again. Don't worry about that. We're just changing how it looks and how it feels. All right, so now we're going to dive into column formatting. So I'm going to hand the mic over to April, who's going to introduce us to column formatting.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so as David just said, with column formatting, that's kind of like a subset of list formatting, right? That's going to apply to an individual column, whereas the view formatting applies to an entire row. So with column formatting, just like we have the two flavors of list formatting itself, column and view, we have two flavors of column formatting as well. We have one called custom formatting. So what this is going to do is give you a true no-code wizard-like experience to apply custom formatting. So you're going to be able to point and click and apply specific formatting using some out-of-the-box actions with certain field types like date choice, yes, no, and others based on your data type. On the other hand, though, we have the true full-blown column formatting, which is going to be your low-code JSON that you can apply to the particular column. So with this, obviously, you're going to have way more control than you have with some of the point-and-click wizard-like experience with custom formatting. You can also, with that, reference other column content as well. And we have a lot of options here as far as styling. We can even do things like Excel-like expressions. We can cross column calculations and comparisons, kind of like how you would do with SharePoint calculated fields. And we can even change the function of what that column does. So in the screenshot that David just showed earlier, one of the samples, we had a text field and we transformed that into an image, right? So that's something that we can do with column formatting, is transform what that object actually is. So say from an image or to a hyperlink from a text field. So with that, I think this is best demonstrated with a demo. So what I'm going to do is start off with the custom formatting route, and we'll take a look and see what options we have here using that true no code out of the box custom formatting. So to do that, we have a list here, and let me just zoom in a bit so we can see. And we have four different fields in this case. We have a title field, we have a date, a choice, and a Boolean. So we're going to look at each of these individual fields and see what kind of custom formatting we have out of the box. Let's start with the date field. So if we want to apply one of these custom formats, all we have to do is select the field, click this drop down, and we'll see a column settings option. And under there in this drop menu, we'll have a format this column button. When we click that, here's where we will see those custom formats. So these are those point and click, easy to use formats. So let's start with this format dates. You see, as soon as I click this button, it's going to automatically apply a format to my list. So I can see that that date column now is highlighted in yellow. Now, what is it doing behind the scenes? Well, what we can do, we see that you have this option for edit styles. So if we click that, we see it's actually recognizing that this is a date field. And with date fields, you might want to apply color coding based off of, is this date before today? Is the date today? Or is it after today? So if, for example, this was a task list type scenario and you wanted to make sure to highlight overdue items in red, this out-of-the-box custom format will help you do that. So you can see that's what it's doing here. If it's after today, it's going to shade it in red. If it is today, it's going to shade it in green. And if it's before, it's going to shade it in yellow. And with this, we do have control to customize these styles a little bit more. So for example, if I click on this one, you see we have this format icon. So we can change here the color. So if I didn't want it to be such a pastel type yellow, I can change this to a little bit deeper yellow easily with that color picker. And we can take it even a step further if we click on this More Styles button. What this is going to do is give us even more options, so we can not only control the fill color, but also the font weight. You can have it italic, underlined, even strike through, which would be good if something, say, is overdue. And you can specify the font color, because a lot of times when you're applying this background shading, the color might need to be changed. So if this yellow doesn't really stand out too well with the gray, so you might make it a deeper black so that you can see the font a little bit better. And then we can even apply icons. So there's a few out-of-the-box icons that we can apply here with the custom formatting. So since this is a date field, I might have a little calendar icon just to add a nice little visual effect to this. Now, these other icons we have available to us with custom formatting, but if we're using the full-blown column formatting, we have a lot more options available to us, and we can use almost any icon imaginable. But this is just a nice quick pick list of icons you might want to use. Other things we can configure here are alignment. So if we are using an icon, We can choose to show that to the left or the right of the object in the column. And then we have some border options. So we can shade that individual column in some borders or underlines or just top and bottom. So you can kind of see all the options here, just a right border, left border, and just customize it a little bit more. So that's everything that we can do with this out of the box custom formatting. Now, if we go back here, let me save this because right now it's not applied yet until I save my changes. So now if I click out, I can see that that's applied. Now let's take a look at the choice field. So that's our date field and what's happening there. So for choice, the same thing. If we want to apply custom formatting, we're going to go into those column settings and format this column. You'll see we have a few more options for the choice. So we have background colors, which this is going to be very similar to what we just saw with the date field, right? It's going to know which choice field you have. So if we go to edit styles on this, it knows for this particular drop-down control, I have two options. I have transformers and I have GoBots. So it's going to take those and give you options to choose what color that column should be shaded for each choice. And again, we can click in here and customize that to whatever we would like. Now, if we go back though, the other option that I really like for these choice fields is this choice pills option. So if you select that one, you see that it's taking that, but it's kind of rounding the corners and making it look kind of more like a button in a way, rather than just filling in and shading in the entire column itself. So I like that one a lot. And if you've used and looked at Microsoft List, some of those list templates that are out there, they actually use this choice pills type formatting in those templates quite a bit. So that's the one I like. And same thing with that. If you go to edit styles, you can choose the background color and different things like the font weight for these, and even icons within these different choice pills as well. So pretty cool stuff that we can do. So let's save that. So our list is already looking much better with just these column custom formats alone. Now let's take a look at some Boolean fields. Same thing with this. We'll go to column settings and format this column. And for this one, it's going to be similar to the date. So we're going to have the format yes and no. So it's just going to, you're going to have two options here, right? A yes or a no. So it's going to do the shading there. And we have, again, the same control that we had with the date and with the choice field as far as the icons and the font and all of that. Now for each of these, when we were looking at the custom formats, you might have noticed that we all had one option in common with all of these. So let's go back into, say, date, for example. So if I go back into format column for that, we see we had this conditional formatting option. So this one's pretty cool. So while these quick ones like format dates and then the choice pills for the drop down and the format for the Boolean easily just took the data and gave us three options or different options to choose from and shade it. Well, if we need to do something a bit more in depth, then we can choose this conditional formatting option, because what this is going to do is allow you to customize your own unique rules to set the style of this column. So, and what's really powerful about this is we can actually take data from other columns in a rule and choose how we're going to format this. Excuse me. So, for example, we have an option here for show values as. If I click that text right there, this is going to take me into our rule creator. So if you've used InfoPath in the past, I know for me, this kind of reminded me of the InfoPath days with where we choose our if statement, right? So we have an if and we can choose the column. So this is where we can go and it's going to look at all the different columns you have in your list. And you can do a condition based off of that. So for example, I can say if choice, which is this field here where we have the options for transformers or GoBots. And then you just choose your comparison. So if we click that drop down, we have is equal to or is not equal to. So I could say if choice is equal to, and then again, it's going to look at all the choice options that we have in that column. And I can say if it's equal to transformers. So now we just built out one condition. We can nest and have multiple conditions here as well. So you see I have an add condition action. So I can even do an and if or an or if. So I can choose my option there and I can build out the same thing. I can say, and if the Boolean is equal to, say, yes, right? So I'm taking the values from these other columns to apply a format to my date column. Then now I say, okay, those are your conditions. What action? What do you want to have happen? So that's here on this show list item as. So I can click on my style button And now I can say, okay, so if this item is transformers and the Boolean is yes, then I want this date field to be highlighted, say in this orangish color, right? And let's go into the more styles, and you can't really read that. So let's change that. Let's see, to black maybe. Okay. So I just built out an entire formatting based off of so that's really powerful. Right. And one thing I will point out, this is going to get into our next piece that we're going to show here, is in all these formats that we're looking at, we have this advanced mode option at the bottom, you may have noticed. So what that's going to do is take you into your traditional column formatting option, because all this custom formatting is doing is giving you a nice wizard-like shell to produce the JSON behind the scenes that this needs to style the column, right? So everything that I just did there and clicked with my roles, this is what it generated for me, is all of this JSON, right? So it's pretty cool that it's doing all this for us behind the scenes. So if for any reason we need to customize this more than we can out of the box. So, for example, with this, we couldn't really customize the padding, right? So you see that we have some padding here. I could go in and just manually overwrite that and put in some padding in the style. And now when I do that, you see the date field gets pushed over to the right a little bit. So we do have that option with the custom formatting to let it do most of the work for us. And then we can always come in here if we want to customize this JSON. But as David said earlier, I don't want you all to get really bogged down on the whole JSON part, because it's really about showing the art of the possible and how we can take samples that are already out there and just copy and paste those and get started. But just know that this is an option. All right, so that leads me in then to the next piece that I wanted to show here. So we just looked at the custom formatting. Now, what can we do with the full-blown column formatting? So
April,
to show
we
this,
have a few questions in the chat that I think we should probably look at.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
There's
Teresa,
one
I'm handling those, I think, as we
I see that you just replied. My bad. Thank you, David.
No problem.
Sorry,
Cool.
April.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, let me know if there's something that you want me to pause and mention here while I'm talking. But cool. Thanks for handling those, David. Awesome. So to show the full-blown custom column formatting here, let's take a look at this date field that we just looked at, right? Like, how can we customize this even further? So to do that, I have a sample here, and it's this date calendar icon. So again, this is where we say all you have to do is know how to copy and paste. This is a sample, and it's out there on the GitHub repo, and we'll show this later on. But I'm just going to show you what that kind of looks like and how, if you wanted to find one of these samples, you can do that. So there is a link to the repo here that we'll provide later, but you'll just go here and then you'll see that it's broken out between column samples and view samples. So view samples is what David's going to be talking about here in a little bit, and column samples is what I'm showing, where you apply it to the individual column. So if we know we want a sample for a column, we can just click into that folder. And now we have all of this rich repo of different column formats that we can apply. So the one that I'm showing you is this date page a day calendar. So when you click on one of these formats, you're going to get a nice preview of what this is going to look like, so you know what to expect. So I can see when I apply this sample, it's going to format that in a cool little calendar type format that you'd expect to see, like, say, for a date on your phone or mobile device. Now, how do I actually apply this so I can copy and paste it? Well, all we have to do is click on this JSON file that's here in the repo, and we'll just go through and we'll copy this code. Again, don't get too bogged down on what all this is doing quite yet, because we just need to know how to copy and paste. So if I want to use that back here in my list on my date field, now that I copied that, all I have to do is come down and click on the dropdown, go to column settings and format this column again, just like where we were with the custom format. But instead of using these custom formats, what I'm going to do is scroll down, and we see here we have this advanced mode option. So we're going to go right into that, and that's going to give us that text box where we can paste in our own JSON. So I'm going to remove what we just did with the custom formatting there, and I'm going to paste in what we copied from that GitHub repo. Another thing I'll point out here is you see we have two buttons. We have a preview button and we have a save. So one thing that I do recommend is when you're kind of trying these out and you're not exactly sure if it's going to work or not, right? Make sure you use that preview button first to see what it's going to look like before you click save, because as soon as you click save, that format is applied for everyone that has access to the list. So you might accidentally, temporarily, blank out your field, and users might panic and think that there's no data in there, even though, as David said earlier, any format you apply is not affecting the actual data in your list, right? So if you did apply a format and something was wrong, right, your data is still safe. You don't have to worry about that. You just remove the format and all is well. But that's why this preview button is really important. So you see I click preview. Now just for me, I can see a live preview of that. And once I click save, that's applied for everyone in the list. So this shows the power of, yeah, so with the custom formatting, we're able to, shade it in, which is pretty cool. But with this column formatting, we completely made that look totally different than the data that we had in there, right? So that's one example. Well, how do we kind of take this up a notch? So to do that, let's go into a different list. And now this one is, I want to show how we can take data and even do some calculations within these formats. So for this sample here, we have a title field and we have two number fields. We have a before value and we have an after value. So what I would like to do is kind of do a comparison to see, is this before value and the after value here, is the after value higher than or lower than this before value, right? So to do that, we have a format. Let's go back here and we'll take a look at that format. And you'll see with these formats, they're relatively short right now. So this is only 19 lines of text, right? And with this, we're able to apply some custom formatting that's going to actually do some calculations. So you might notice here we have some if statements going on. So with the formatting, once you get more used to it and you want to kind of understand how to create your own, it's kind of like some of the logic here, really your calculated columns or your Excel expressions. So to be able to compare this before and after value, we're just using an if statement like you would in Excel, right? So, we're saying if the after value and then we have greater than before, then we're going to, in this case, show an icon. So that's what's going to happen here. Else, we're going to show a different icon if it's lower. So that's really all that's happening behind the scenes. Now to apply this, we click on the after column, go to column settings and format. And again, we'll go down to the advanced mode option. Let's paste in that sample here, click save. And voila, so you see now we're able to add an icon into this, and it's taking in the context again and doing some calculations to see if this value is higher or lower. And if it's higher, it's showing an icon pointing up, that's green. And if it's lower, it's showing an icon that's red pointing down, right? So an easy way to do some calculations with this as well. Now we can even take this another step further. So we were just able to determine, with that less than or equal than, if this was higher or lower. But what if we want to tell the difference, the number value difference? So for example, like this would be 5 points difference, right? We can do that with this as well. So if we look, now this formatting is a little bit longer. So we went from, let's say, 19 lines to 30, but still not too bad. So we're still, comparing here if the after value and the before is greater than or equal to and showing the icon. But what we've added down here is another element to see if it's greater than or equal to, and then we're going to actually do some calculations to get that value. So to apply this, we'll just copy this. And again, this is a sample out there, so you don't have to worry about recreating this yourself. So we'll click on the drop down for after, go to our column settings and format this column, and we'll replace what's in there with this. And voila, you see, as soon as we do, now we still have that up and down arrow, but now it's letting us know the difference between the two values. So we're able to do that math and that calculation, which is pretty cool and pretty powerful. All right, so last thing that I wanted to show is, now we've showed calculations, we showed some basic custom formatting. Well, how can we transform the data so that this isn't even like a text field or a number value, for example, like maybe it's a picture or a hyperlink? That's something else that we can do here. So let's go into a different list. So this list is some social profiles, right? So we have a title with someone's name. We have a single line of text field that's storing their Twitter profile handle, right? And then we have an email field. So what if we wanted to take this Twitter profile column here, get that value, and have it automatically pull in their profile picture from Twitter and make that display here. So that's something we can do. And this is pretty cool because we're actually able to call and get data from an outside source like Twitter, and just using this value here, surface that up as an image. So to see how that's going to work here, let's close out of some of this. See, just a second. I think it closed out of the too much stuff here. Okay. There we go. All right. So this is what this sample is. Again, only like 30 something lines, right? So really all it's doing at the heart is nothing too complicated. So if you are familiar with HTML at all, and again, if you're not, don't worry, you don't really have to know this. We're just going to take that text value and we're going to make it an image with an image tag. And to pull the data from Twitter, we're just going to pass in a URL, and then we're going to pass in the value of that Twitter handle from our column. And then we're going to add a JPEG to it, and we're going to be able to transform that into an image. So nothing too complex going on there. So now if we click on the Twitter column and go to the column settings and format this column, and again, we'll go to the advanced mode and we'll paste that sample in, click save. There you go. So you see we were able to take single line of text value and make it into an image. And bonus tip, if we hover over these, you see it's even having a tooltip that's going to show the text value in there so we can actually see their Twitter handle name. So pretty cool that we're able to completely transform what that object is in there. And again, behind the scenes, we're not changing anything. If we click on one of these, we still have their actual name value in there. So it's not doing anything to our data. Now, what if we took this up another notch? How are we able to make this image a clickable link that's going to open up their Twitter profile? Well, we can do that as well. So let's open up one more file here. We see we've added, again, just a few more lines to this. So really all we're doing here is we're going to take what we were already doing with that image, right? And we're going to wrap it in an A tag, which is just a way in HTML to create a hyperlink, right? So we're going to wrap that in a hyperlink that's pointing to Twitter, and it's going to pull in their Twitter handle. So now if I copy that and go back, we'll replace what we have here, format this column, paste that in, click save. And now you see as soon as I hover over it, we have a pointer, which means that is a hyperlink. So if I click on Chris here, you see that's going to go take us straight to his Twitter profile. So pretty cool functionality there. Another way that this really comes in handy is, say, for this email field. Actually, I'll say that for a minute, because one thing I want to show is how everything that we're seeing so far is controlling in the view, right, different columns and changing the format of that. But if we click new, for example, you see like the form control and how we can go in and add a new person here. What if we want to format this, right? What are our options here? This is a really good way to integrate Power Apps into your SharePoint forms. This way to kind of customize this. One thing I'm seeing right off the bat when I'm looking at this is that we have country, and we have the options to choose Canada or US. And then we also have fields for state or province. So obviously, if you choose Canada, we want them to fill in the province. They choose United States, we want them to fill in the state. Well, I mean, wouldn't it be nice if, depending on what they choose for the country, it's only going to show either state or province, right? Now that's something that Power Apps could really help us with, right? If we were able to customize this form with Power Apps. So I just wanted to show you a quick example of how, Power Apps combined with this list formatting that we're looking at is really powerful, because you can not only customize your forms, but also your list. So to do that, we can just click on this Power Apps button that we see here in the SharePoint list, and we can select the Customize Forms option. So what that's going to do is going to open up the Power Apps editor so that we can control and override this form. And you see I've already did some formatting here. Now if we take a look at what's going on, We see that this right here is our state card, right? So that's where our state field is stored, and then there's our province. So what I did is I just did a little bit of formatting. So if I click on the state, for example, we have this property in Power Apps called visible. What visible is doing, let me zoom in just a bit so we can see this really well, is it's going to let us put in a formula, again, really Excel-like. So if you're familiar with Excel formulas, this should be pretty simple. So we're able to put in an if statement, and we're going to say if, and this whole data card value 3.selected.value is this country field. So you see it's kind of highlighting that in green. So we're saying if this value is equal to the United States, then I want to show this state field. So that's true because the visible is a true or false to show or hide. Otherwise, I want to set it to false and have it hide it, right? So I just went and I did this same type of condition on the province field. So if we go to its visible property, that's with, not visible, you see that I'm saying if this country value equals Canada, then set that to true to show, otherwise set it to false. So with just a little bit of formatting there in Power Apps, I was able to reduce this form down and make it a little bit smarter, right? So it's only going to show the required information when they select that. A few other bells and whistles that I've added here. You can easily add images in here if you want to make it look a little bit spiffier. So I went in and I've just added, I went to Insert in Media and Image, and I've added the Twitter icon there next to the Twitter handle field. And then last thing I did was for country. So again, I went into Insert Media and Image, and I did a little bit of dynamic stuff here. So what I'm saying on this image is if the data card value 3, so if this country is equal to US, then I want to show the US flag. Otherwise, I want to show the Canadian flag, right? It's just a few things that we can do to quickly make our forms look as nice as what we're making our list look like. So to apply this to our SharePoint list, all we have to do is click on Save, and then we'll publish it to make it live for our users. So we'll publish to SharePoint. It'll take just a minute. And now we can go back to SharePoint in our list here. And let me just refresh to make sure. So now if we click this new, we'll see that we have our nice Power Apps customized SharePoint form here to enter in the data. So now I can go in and let's add David here as a contact. And see, what is your Twitter handle, David? I forgot. Is it David 1 or 2?
Yep, exactly like the name. Yep.
Okay. And so now here's that formatting that we just added, right? So he's from the US, right? So now we have the nice US flag, and then we have the state option. If I were to choose Canada, it's going to show province in the Canada flag. Then I can select his state, save. Now we have a nice formatted form there. And I might put in your name wrong there. And one thing, let's see, I'm going to do real quick is edit in grid view, and I want to fill out David's email because there's one last thing I want to show you before I hand it up to David. So let's put in his email, exit there. Okay, so what if we want to take this even further and this email field, for example, what if I'd want to like quickly start a Teams chat with one of these people, by clicking on, say, their email? Well, that's something that we can do with column formatting as well. So if I copy this sample that we have here, and I'm going to apply that here to this email field. So we're going to go to column settings, format this column in advanced. Oops, actually put in a D there. We'll click save. We see now that's transformed that email field, and now it says chat and Teams, and it has the Teams logo there. So what's going to happen when I click on this now is it's going to open up Microsoft Teams, and it's going to take me directly to a chat with David. Again, so now I can start chatting, and I even, if you notice, pre-populated some information. So if this was a list about, like inventory or whatever, and this was the owner of the item, whatever it might be, it can pre-populate your chat with some text, and you can just click send, and I can have a conversation with David here real time. So just lots of ideas and things that you can do with this column formatting that I wanted to put out there. You can also do things like start a flow from here. So that's a format that's out there as well. So you can transform this to kick off a flow. So lots of use cases that hopefully you found interesting and helpful. And with that, I'm going to switch it back over to David. So we covered column formatting. Now let's see how we can take this up a notch even more and customize our entire views with view formatting.
All right, nicely done, April. Thank you. Just confirm for me you can see the view formatting slides.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, well, that was a lot of amazing power with very little effort, and we hope that that's what you were able to take away from those demos on the column formatting. We don't want you to feel any more overwhelmed for view formatting, though. It's going to provide even more power to you than you've seen so far, but with the same minimal amount of effort, and then you can take it to another notch if you want, as we've seen. So let's take a quick overview of view formatting. What does it include? What can we do? How does it work? Well, this is definitely going into the more low-code experience, right? So when we say JSON, of course, there's a big debate on whether that's code or not. You see curly braces, people see curly braces, they think code. I tend to agree. It's not functional. It's not doing any real programmatic logic in terms of if I click on this, then go do that. It's really more or less just defining how things should look. So don't let that overwhelm you, because there's lots of tools that are available to you to start getting comfortable. View formatting does have a wizard-like experience like you've seen with the column formatting. It's newer. It's not as mature or robust as column formatting, but it does continue to get improved. Microsoft has a huge investment in lists. Obviously, Microsoft lists, as you hear, as the new buzzword, is really just SharePoint lists behind the scenes. So they all work together in the same way. And so we see that continued investment by Microsoft. Instead of the individual column, though, you're looking at overwriting the entire item in a row. So just like with column formatting, you're able to control the HTML, the look and feel, right, the CSS styles, as well as no JavaScript. So you don't have to worry about that. Even though the name of JSON includes the word JavaScript object notation, there isn't actually any real functional JavaScript going on there. So you can't control it in that way. But you can control it in another way, and we'll take a look at that later. So there is a way to enhance that. All right, so let's take a look at some view formatting demos. Let me bring up my browser window here. Now we're going to continue on the same path that we did with April. We're going to continue to look at some of these social profiles, because we want to see how we can continue to enhance that experience. She showed us how we can take that individual column of data and transform it into something that is more appreciated by our users in terms of value and content that we as humans prefer to see. We prefer to see imagery. We prefer to see pictures of things and people. It says 1,000 words, as they say. So it's much more appealing to us when we come in than just say a Twitter name. So if we look at this example right here, we're showing a little bit more. We've got that state and province for our individual community contributors here. And as she mentioned, utilizing Power Apps in this space to make that new form better is a fantastic way to combine those technologies, right? But in terms of list formatting, how could we make this entire thing look better from a view perspective? So when we talk about that, again, we're talking about these individual columns or rows, right? Because when we focus on them individually, they certainly make sense, right? Chris from Tennessee, it maybe doesn't quite make sense to see no province there, but if we're from geography, then yeah, okay, we understand. It's still distracting, right? It's still distracting to have to see a blank space, even more so in the Canadian friends, because now it's just kind of breaking up in the view of our list, right? So we're like, okay, they're from Canada. I got to skip over state. It doesn't make any sense to move province over here necessarily, because then you have the same problem with the American folks. And what if this was going beyond just a simple two-country perspective? What if it's multiple countries? Then you start talking about all these other potential issues, and you're having columns with a bunch of empty data, and it's just distracting. It doesn't make any sense. This is where view formatting comes in and is available to us from a very powerful perspective. Let me go back. A very powerful perspective. But how do we take advantage of that? Well, you saw to invoke the column formatting, we go to column settings and we go to format this column. The view is not much different, right? Here is where we're used to invoking our views, and we can have multiple views. Now, that's an important distinction because while you only ever have one column, that also means you only ever have one place to format your column formatting experience. And that will carry over from view to view because a column is a column, right? There's no separation of columns between views. Views, though, on the other hand, are distinctly different from one another. So the all items view, the column format view, the contact card view, those are all distinctly different. And each view can have its own view formatting definition. So we're going to stick with the all items view for today. But when I go to format that view, as I would right here, and it pops up this wizard-like experience, just know that each view can have its own view formatting definition assigned to it. So if you think about maybe sort of a personalized experience for different viewers, you could have that. You could have a different view for different purposes, and each of those views has a distinctly different view formatting definition assigned to it to show something different for the audience, depending on who that audience is. So it's a powerful feature. Now, we're not going to jump right into this wizard-like experience. As I mentioned, it's very basic at first. It does things like alternating row, conditional formatting. It is improving. We see things like the little radio button checkbox here, right? So that obviously indicates that they're continuing to add more so that we can choose between multiple choices. But we're going to step directly into that advanced mode where we see the ability to paste in our view formatting definitions. Now I'm going to take some additional samples. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste. I'm going to pull them over here. I've got them off screen, but I'm going to pull them over and show you that we're still dealing with a fairly short amount of script here, right? 119 lines, and much of that, I mean, when you consider just this last 10 lines is nothing more than closing braces. We're breaking that out into a very verbose way of looking at it. So it's not even that complex when we think about it, but it is completely and totally available to you for free in the resources that we'll share with you at the end of the session. And I'm just going to copy and paste. Again, we don't want you to feel like you have to type that stuff directly in this box. You can certainly come into here and start typing, right, and do things directly in this box. But there are better ways, and especially when you're taking existing samples. And taking these existing samples, by the way, are a great training method because you can apply them and then you can start deconstructing them and learning exactly how they work. You can do the same thing with the out of the box. The behind the scenes, as April showed, creates this JSON for you so you can come in and analyze it. So I'm going to paste in this sample and I'm going to hit preview. And now we notice that that entire experience has been transformed. We're no longer seeing individual columns. We're just seeing now individual rows of data, right? And what does that include? Well, we've got the Twitter profile picture. We see size now, right? We see the title is being utilized, Bo and Seb, right? They're being displayed there. We see a little call to action where we're saying follow Chris Kent or Bo or Seb on Twitter. And then we're seeing some other Chrome, right? So we've applied some nice drop-down shadows to our box to create some separation, some spacing between them. And of course, we can click on this and it'll bring Twitter up and allow us to follow any of these individual community contributors if we would like. But what about the geography? We don't see anything there, right? We haven't taken that into account. We certainly could look to just display that information conditionally here, right? We could simply take their location and do some conditional logic like we did with the numeric values and say, well, if they're from the United States, then show the state. If they're from Canada, show the province. But what else could we do that would maybe be even better? Well, we can reach out to external data sources. Now, sometimes they're called APIs, programming interfaces, right? Don't feel like that overwhelms you. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to make a call out to a mapping service and just send it this country and the location. So in this case, it's going to be the country and the province or the country and the state, right? And that is just a repeatable pattern. What makes these things work for us and the ability to show these photos and what you'll see in a moment, which is the geographic location, is the service we're going to use, in this case Google Maps, just expects this thing which is the country and the state or the province, and then it's going to give us something back. That's repeatable. So all we're really doing is sending a hyperlink or a request for a hyperlink, right? We're constructing that on our own. And I'll show that to you. So I'm going to go to a little bit longer view formatting definition here. I'm going to paste it in, and we see if I come in here, all I'm doing is going out to this Google APIs, and I am providing some conditional logic, right? If the province has a value, we're going to provide the province. If the state has a value, we're going to provide the state. And what Google does is it just returns an image. So we're not really like sending any real truly programmatic requests here where we're then having to use JavaScript. They just have a repeatable pattern that we're able to bake into our list formatting definition. And what they return to us is some HTML that we just simply say, display that, right? So what does that look like? Well, let me hit save. And this, and what we see now is it has their geographic locations, right? In the case of Chris, he lives in Tennessee, so we see that identified there. In the case of Bo, he lives in Colorado, and Seb and Hugo both live in Canada, Quebec specifically, or Montreal for Seb. And then we see a much broader scope of space here for Hugo because he lives in Ontario. Well, that's a huge amount of space. But what's the additional benefit for us here? Well, this is actually clickable too, right? So when I click on Colorado, it opens up in a new tab and it gives me a cool little highlight of that geographic location. So now we've taken what has really been just static information about these users or these community contributors, and we've created functionality in our list where functionality didn't exist. We could have gone and gotten this URL and a little image and included that in our list, but now via list formatting, we're able to dynamically build that, right? We just need to provide the necessary data to do that, and we're able to then rely on our list formatting definition to display that data for us. And if you were to look at this in its own, right, just kind of take out the context right there of the list, and you were to look at that, no one would know this is list behind the scenes. This looks like a custom web part, which it can be. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, so a lot of information we've covered here, right? We can override that list experience, but we can actually do more. In this case, we've just taken the data and we've kind of redecorated with it, right? We've brought in a map, we've turned the Twitter profile into a hyperlink, we've used that to pull in an image, but there's not really any, massive calculations going on here like April showed within her first example of the number comparison. Could we do something like that, though, with view formatting? Well, absolutely. So I'm going to go over to another list here, and this is student grades. And just to set the context, what we have here is 4 quarters of grades, right? So if you think back to when we were in school, each quarter we would get, in all likelihood, a numeric grade associated to maybe the subject or just the overall class. And over time, we would end up accumulating an average grade, right? So in our first quarter, if we had 100, of course, at the end of that, in all likelihood, that's an A+. By the time we get to our second quarter, though, depending on what our second quarter grade is in comparison to our first quarter grade, you combine those together, you can figure out the average, then you're going to have an average grade. And then additional to that, is that each teacher may have some conditional logic that says, well, okay, only 99 and 100 are A pluses, but 95, 96, 97, those are A's, those are solid A's. But another teacher may say, you know what, anything over 97 is an A plus. So you've got some subjective conditional logic going on there between teachers, and that would be great to take into account as well. Now, this could be monthly numbers, this could be quarterly as we're seeing here, this could be weekly, this could be financial data. We're just simply using a very simple example here of 4 numeric grade values across 4 quarters, which represent the full year of the student. But it could be, right? So think broader when you think of being able to take advantage of these features. It doesn't have to just be this kind of narrow scope of context. But what can we do with that? So we want to be able to do all those things I described. We want to do the mathematical calculations. What's the average grade, not just for the first 2 quarters, but as we go. Once we get into the 3rd quarter, well, then we need to take into account first, second, and third. We get into the 4th quarter, we need to take into account all 4, and then we want to set the conditional logic around all 4 at the same time, right? Certainly what we have here is functional, works. It lets us know what those individual grades are. Certainly doesn't provide us the math involved in providing the average grades, but could we do that with view formatting? Absolutely. So we would invoke that view formatting definition method the exact same way. We go to our view and we select format current view. We're going to go directly into advanced mode. Now I'm going to bring up a list formatting definition, and you'll notice immediately this one is a lot longer, right? Over 500 lines of JSON here, but it's very repetitive, right? So as I get in here, when I do things like the comparison or the conditional logic to determine whether or not something is an A+, right? An A+ right there, or an A, or a D+, right? Well, that just gets repeated for each quarter, right? So you'll notice that now I'm taking that in, and for each quarter, I'm really just doing the same thing. I'm just taking into account the additional quarter now, as opposed to the first 2 quarters. And by the 4th quarter, it gets kind of long, but it's really, it's really not really, I should say it's really not really, it's really not adding a whole bunch of new content. It's just repeating a lot of the same content. All right, so don't let the length of these overwhelm you. And again, this is a free a demo example that is available to you, sample. So I'm going to paste it in, and I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to close the window here. Now what we've done is we've turned that row into a little bit more of a contact card. So we've been able to include the name. Again, we did some of that styling. It uses some of that drop shadow, which maybe is a little distracting here, but I wanted to show it just to know that you can do that. And now I've taken into account that 1st quarter numeric grade, right? No real calculation is being done here other than the conditional logic to determine what that grade would be from a letter grade perspective. But as we get into the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarter, well, now I'm able to do that mathematical calculation to determine what the average grade is, right? So my grade here is 75 and 100, 87.5 would be that average grade. That's a solid B. And then I continued to improve since I fell behind so much. By the end of the year, I got a B+, and Hugo, being the fine student he is, had straight A's and beat me outright. But this is a much easier to consume format than it is with just those 4 numbers, right? We've been able to demonstrate here the use of a number of things. We've done conditional logic. We've done calculative logic. We've changed the look and feel. And now all of this is much more intuitive way to understand the content than just simply looking at those 4 numbers spread across four quarters. Much more valuable way for our users to incorporate this data. So very powerful. Again, it is a longer list formatting definition, but really didn't take that long to create. And that's the thing that we want you guys to be empowered by today, is that you don't have to feel overwhelmed by trying to create all of that. All right, well, let's jump back to the slides, and let's go into another topic on advanced list formatting. So we saw how you can edit directly there in the browser if you wanted to. You could start with the wizard, and you could look at the wizard behind the curtain, if you will, and see what it generated in terms of that JSON, and then you can start learning and tweaking and using that. It's not the most, if you are comfortable with writing code, it's not the most intuitive way to do it. Visual Studio Code, on the other hand, which is a free tool from Microsoft, provides what's called IntelliSense support. And that means that it will give you little helpers as you create them. There's also a new tool that Chris King came out with that we can show you in the end as well. Now, if you are comfortable with code, but you're just now diving into list formatting, there's also an auto deployment technique that you can take advantage of. This combines PowerShell or the Microsoft 365 CLI, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. But you saw, if we're working within Visual Studio Code like this, and then we have to make changes, and then we have to select all copy, Alt-Tab, go back to our browser, paste it in, preview it or save it, and then you rinse, wash, repeat that, it can become sort of a taxing process, right? You feel like you're alt tabbing, and I'm very iterative when I write my JSON or code. I want to make small changes, confirm it's working, and then go back and forth, right? That's kind of a pain. This auto deployment technique is available to you, which automates all that. So you can set up a keyboard friendly shortcut. You select your keyboard shortcut. It activates PowerShell or the Office 365 CLI, and behind the scenes, it connects to your list, updates the list formatting definition, brings your browser to the forefront of your screen, refreshes it, and you see your content, right? Which is pretty slick. So it provides you just a little bit cleaner way of deploying, if you will, while you're developing your list formatting definition out there. All right, so what are some resources for you that we've showed you? So we're going to give you a quick glimpse and some URLs here to those list formatting resources. And then we're going to come back and show you how to step it up even another notch, because it's very powerful. But what we've focused on so far is almost all out of the box stuff. It's everything out of the box that's available to you. So what are some of those resources? Well, the first one is a collection of community curated samples, and April is going to walk you through some of this detail.
Yeah, so everything that we showed you all today is out there on this of community samples. So there's over 40 different view formatting samples like David showed. There's over 56 different column formatting samples like I showed. And to David's point, these column samples can be used alongside the view formatting samples, so you can really make even more samples when you mix and match the two from here. So the links here, which David's going to be putting in the chat, you're going to have the column formatting GitHub sample repo there and the view formatting sample. So you can get to that at aka.ms whack list hyphen formatting. We'll take you right there where you can see all these great samples and start using those.
Yes, and as April mentioned, they're available for you for free. There's no cost. And if you have questions, you can even ask them in the issues list. And if you're not familiar with GitHub, don't hesitate to reach out and ask us for some assistance. We also have a sharing is caring in the PNP repo or in the PNP community that walks you through how to use some of that. But as you mentioned, the aka.ms list formatting, that is a browser or a gallery there, which is a nice way of looking at some of those. So start there for sure. All right, how can you learn more about list formatting, right? Well, as I mentioned, the PNP, or what that stands for, is Patterns and Practices. You can kind of see it spelt out above me on the signboard, is a community where we have a number of resources, one of which are list formatting resources, which is what that previous URL takes you to. And every other week on a Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Central, or 10 a.m. Eastern, there is a SharePoint general development call. And in this typically is regular adding tips and tricks by Chris Kent, who owns that particular repo. So he manages that repo along with the other PNP members. And he's constantly showing up the new and cool ways in which you can use list formatting. Warrior horses, which is a funny backstory, has become a theme for his demos. And so it's a fun way in seeing that. So all of them are recorded, by the way. All those calls are recorded if you can't make it. So you can watch the videos if you want to after the fact. But you can get to them by going to aka.ms/m365pnp, and then at the top there is a community calls option for you, and you can scroll down and you can see the invite for all of those. Thank you, April. And that link is in the chat, so you can download a calendar invite for all of those, as well as just join directly from there if you're more comfortable with kind of ad hoc joining it just in time. And we've got some more resources. April's going to talk to you about these.
Yeah, so speaking of Chris Kent, if you are interested in going deeper into how this whole JSON thing works and how to create your own formats from scratch with JSON, I really suggest that you check out Chris Kent's session from the SharePoint conference last year. I think it was last year, not the year before, right? I've lost all aspects of time with this lately.
You mean it's not still March? I thought it was
yeah,
still March.
I know, right? Right. But yeah, that session is really great. I know David and I both attended it at the SharePoint conference there, and he goes, like, it really explains in detail, you know, what JSON is and some of the detailed attribute and syntax there, supported column types, and just takes it to that next level so that you can get a good understanding of JSON and how you can create formats from scratch with that. So definitely recommend checking that out.
Yeah, and it really dives deep. I mean, that PowerPoint slide that you can get to via that URL is incredibly resourceful in terms of really depth if you're looking to dive in super deep on that. All right. Transformation, right? We all get excited when we think of transformers, list formatting transformers. Hopefully you've seen what that means so far, but there is even more that you can do that you may not have known. You are able to combine all of the list formatting information that we've showed you today, the column formatting, the view formatting, with the list web part. Now, this is an out-of-the-box web part that is available to you to take advantage of placing all of this list data. What we've seen so far has been fantastic, but not everyone wants to send their users to the list, right? I always kind of felt like when we were in Classic, you never really had any control. You never had list formatting like this in Classic. And so we always worked hard on creating these front-facing pages that look beautiful. And sometimes we'd say, well, we'll just send them to the list. And that to me was like, oh, you're really ripping that curtain away from the wizard. And now that magic has been taken away. How can we avoid doing that if we want to in the modern experience? Well, combining our list formatting with the list web part is exactly that. So let's take a look at that demo. I'm going to go to a page here, just a simple page called Transformers, nothing special. And I'm going to drop or create a section up here, actually, a one-column section. And I'm going to drop that list web part. And that's what it's called. It's called list, right? Just right there. On, and it allows me to choose the list that I want to see. Social profiles, I'll go there, and now you can see it's carrying over that list formatting definition. Now we may not want some of this other stuff, right? So you can go in and edit the list, and you can click this very intuitive show command bar to hide it. You turn it on to hide it, which seems a little weird, but that's what it does, right? So if I hit apply, we see that goes away. We still do get the see all. That is something that we're currently having to live with, unfortunately. So it kind of gives that breadcrumb to behind the scenes, if you will. But still, it's amazing now because we've been able to carry over our list formatting definitions onto a page. And what else does that let us do? Well, if I moved this guy right down here, right? So I'm going to move that web part down there. I can also add another list web part. So it's not just exclusive to one. I can combine them. So now I'm taking that list, right? Hide that. I'm taking multiple lists, and these don't necessarily go together per se, but you can see that I'm able to combine the data between different lists together onto a single page. And you know, short of the see all button, and when it's in published mode, you'd be hard pressed to convince anyone that this is not just list data. But at the end of the day, that's really what it is. It's just list data. And we're displaying it in a different way on a page. So think of these pseudo-like dashboards are being created for us that didn't really require any development from a pure development perspective. We're just simply creating a recipe, if you will, using JSON on how we want our SharePoint list data to look. And now we're able to put it on a page. And that's really taking it up a notch and transforming it. But wait. Don't call now. There's more. You can do even more with your list data. You see, I've got this information here in this student grades, right? And it doesn't really do anything other than give me any information. And it may not. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I would like for this to come and highlight each of these quarters in a different way. When I hover over them, maybe I want a call to action or something like that. You don't really get that out of the box here. But what you can do is you can inject, and this is where we're getting outside of that out-of-the-box experience, but there are community resources available that allow us to leverage adding additional CSS to our page. Since we can display this list formatting definition on a page, well then, can we also include CSS to take control of that HTML? Now, some may say, well, wait a second. Microsoft has always guided us to not change the page because we don't always own it. We should really only override web parts in which we are creating as a developer because we own that HTML. Well, technically, we own the HTML for this list formatting definition. our list formatting definition created this HTML. So Microsoft is not going to change that HTML. And if you're comfortable with CSS, you're able to give definitive names to all of these things that you own. So what does that mean? That means that we can take advantage of other community resources and tools. There is a web part out there that is available called Enhanced List Formatting, created by myself and Hugo Bernier in April. And it allows you to take a great power of injecting custom CSS on your page, right? Now, what does that mean? Well, it is, as I mentioned, great power. And according to Spider-Man, what comes with great power? Great responsibility, right? So when we drop this, we want to realize that while we could use this for evil, you only want to use it for good, right? If you go to try to override styles or HTML that you don't own on this page, for example, the header or the suite bar or something like that, you take on a huge risk, right? Things of loss of styles could be applied, broken styles. And then you're going to get users calling and saying, why is SharePoint broken, right? And it's going to lead to tears and nightmares and blue screens of death. And we don't want that for any of you. So this is kind of like that GPS, right? Don't drive while you're, or don't mess with the GPS while you're driving. We just want you to understand that this is a powerful web part, and with that power comes great responsibility. But it allows us to add custom styles to our page. Now, this is scoped to the page. It's not associated to the list formatting def. So if you create another page, you would have to go do the exact same thing on that page as well. You drop the list web part, you'd add the additional web part here. That is a patterns and practices sample available to you. And what it gives you is this little box to define your custom CSS. And I could open in a full screen editor, and I'm going to just bring over a very simple CSS definition, right? Just very simple. I'm providing some transitions and some CSS. And you'll notice again, right there, I'm using what's called a pseudo attribute, right? And that is not something you can add to a list formatting definition out of the box. It is something you can add if you can apply custom CSS to something you own. In this case, we own that. I created this class name on each of these boxes called VF, View Formatting, Student Grades Common Wrapper, right? And I'm gonna save that, and I'm gonna click into the page. And now when I hover over that, see what happens? It's a real simple thing, but maybe there's some data here that we want to highlight when we hover over the particular quarter, right? And so it brings it a little bit to the forefront. Okay, great, that looks nice. Could we step it up a notch? Could we change background color? Could we rotate it just a little bit? Could we flip it around? Yeah, we could do all those things, right? Because now we own the CSS for that as well as the HTML. So I'm pasting in just a couple of additional things to transform that from a scale perspective and a background color, right? So now when I click in here and I go, and now it's just kind of tweaking it a little bit, right? So just a little cleaner, cooler look, kind of turns it and changes that background color. So now it's really bringing to the forefront and the focus to that individual quarter. And of course, I could include additional information that when you hover over this is displayed in the box, right? Maybe there's a link that's displayed there. Go to, your history of assignments or something like that. I could flip it around using some controls, right, to do more in-depth showing additional information. So a lot of value can be had here. As you can see, out of the box, even in addition to out of the box, you can control and provide even more value. If I publish this page now, again, it's right back into, there we go. I didn't, you know what? I didn't apply it, I don't think. Oh no, something's weird there.
So
It's working.
there were some questions about, David, about grouping and like, are we able to use, list formatting to highlight that? So I didn't believe like without out of the box that you can. Is this something that we could use this web part for to control the group headers formatting at all, or what?
Yeah, I don't. So yeah, the view formatting obviously will supersede the grouping of the view, right? Because at that point, when you're grouping it in the view, Microsoft is controlling that HTML, and then when we apply our view formatting, we are completely overwriting it altogether. And so I wouldn't say that this particular web part would provide that kind of thing to us, right? In terms of being able to do that, because we're really just providing additional CSS. We're not necessarily using JavaScript to transform the data. You could, of course, You could, of course, use additional community web parts to control that data and rewrite it, because you do own the HTML here, right? Because you are controlling what class names this has, etc. But no, I would say that, I would say that you'd handle that sort of in JSON. You could probably do some sort of grouping in there, if statements that check to see how you identify that, or you could take it up a step notch and go beyond list formatting and use something like the modern React content query web part. That gets definitely more into a development atmosphere, but it uses what's called handlebar templates, and handlebar templates are not as complex as having to write your own SPFX control. You're really just creating an HTML. Almost like a list formatting definition, but defining much more richer HTML that you have better control over. And so it's kind of that middleware, what we would call like low code, right? Low code to maybe mo code, as Hugo and I have called it. So yeah, I would say if you're looking to do that kind of grouping, you could do that, or you could get, what you could do as well, is you could get creative with multiple web parts on the page, right? Now that's a little bit of a hack, definitely more wizardry behind the curtain, but from a published perspective on a page, technically it would work if you know exactly how many groups you have and it's not that dynamic. You could actually make a web part per group. And then you could filter and display it, and from a page consumption perspective, nobody would know the difference. Right, because it was just
I did that hack myself with the dynamic filtering and stuff with the web parts. So when it works,
Yep.
So sometimes there's use cases where that will work.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of power here, whether you're just utilizing list formatting out of the box, whether you're combining it with something like the list formatting enhancement web part to add additional styles, definitely a lot of power available to you. We covered a lot of data. We want to thank you all for attending. We're just about running out of time, just a few more minutes. So don't hesitate to reach out to myself or April. There's our Twitter account where I think we're probably the most active, as well as our email addresses. Please don't hesitate to collaborate with us if you have questions. I'd love to interact with the community. But thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you to both of you. It was a great session. I love seeing how we can quickly massage the data and see it in such a nice way in SharePoint now. So I'm going to share the link to you again for if my screen here will wake up. So my screen is not waking up. So as always, you just go out to the mn365.org survey. I'll put the link here into the chat. Please make sure you go out and do that. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, we hear
Yep,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay. My PC is doing funny things. Why is it when you're presenting or something, it always does that? So we are going to be doing a drawing in each session. So for this particular session, I've randomly chosen, I'm going to screw up your name, Lindsay. Lindsay Lattenschlager. So Lindsay, you will be receiving a $25 gift card. If you were out looking at the survey to get that started, there was an issue where the 1 o'clock and 9 o'clock sessions were switched. So that has since been resolved. Again, David and April, I wanted to thank you guys for all your time and effort and presenting on this wonderful topic.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.